Hey everyone, it's Mr. Sutter coming at you with a lesson about lesson two, which is the 2D arrays. And specifically the elements in there and doing stuff with it. So kind of the game plan here is I'm gonna go back to lesson one briefly, go over kind of what's happening there to explain what a two-dimensional array is, and then hop over to lesson two. Okie doke. So getting back to this is unit 5, lesson 1. So we've learned about 1D arrays. And 1D array basically has a string of numbers and it's a row, right? Simply put. Well, now what we're going to do is in unit 5 is we're now going to use two of these hard brackets to show that we're going to make a two-dimensional array. The first bracket stands for rows. The second bracket, when you use them in that order, would stand for columns. So it's row, column, row, column, row, column. Okay. So if I wanted to call things out here, just as a quick recap, the first number here where 85 is, let's see if I can kind of show stuff here a little bit. That first number where 85 is, that is going to represent row 0 and column 0. So technically, that would be labeled as 0 bracket 0. So when I call 00 like that, that's going to be equal to 85, right? So we always number in Java from 0, so we'll do the same thing here, okay? So I can call out row 0, column 1, and that would be 90 now. So that's the numbering convention we're going to remember when we do our two-dimensional arrays. So a lot of times you'll see kind of the two-dimensional arrays. It could be in this format where you can clearly see the rows and columns. Sometimes you'll see it where it'll be on one line, which I'll show you in a minute. The main thing though is if I can get rid of all the annotation that I just did. Basically what's happening is we're going to, I can use this guy here, spotlight it. We're essentially going to use these curly braces to show a row, and the comma is going to break it up. So this is kind of the format you're going to need to know. So if I can make my way over to, and I'm going to go straight to kind of the hard part of the lesson 2, which is two-dimensional arrays. And since I have a pet at home, I went with pet adoptions. And so we're going to kind of jump ahead a little bit, but I think the concept you'll get pretty quickly. But because I want to kind of go through the hard part. Okay, so first things first, in this case, we have adoption runner. That's going to go ahead and basically look at all the pets available for adoption. So here we go. On line 5, the basic thing to pay attention to is we have this pet double bracket pets. I want you to, as you go through these modules, think about what it is that we're coding. So keep in mind here, there's a pet double brackets. It's not a string, it's not an int, it's not a boolean, right? So we use the class name because that's where pets is really going to come from. And lo and behold, here there's a pet.java, which is the pet class. This is where we create a pet, which has a type, right? Say cat, dog, fish, whatever, and the age. So all that's going to be localized with the object for the pet I make, right? And there's get type, and there's all these other things happening here. So when I create in a two-dimensional array, or you might remember from one-dimensional array, if we made it about a certain, where the class is being made, whether it's a Pokemon or pets or cupcakes or whatever, you would refer to that class. So we have this two-dimensional array called pets, and look what it's doing, right? It's instantiating, or not instantiating, but it's declaring these new pet objects. You can see there's three of them in each row. So this is a 3 by 3. Okay, so 3 rows, 3 columns is what I see. We have some sort of object that's created, pet adoptions, from the adoption class, right? So we're instantiating a new object called pet adoptions. And look, it's going to go ahead and take in that two-dimensional array called pets and use it here, right, as part of the constructor. So that's kind of cool. So basically, we're attaching the two-dimensional array pets to the object called pet adoptions, and then they want to print out pet adoptions. And we're going to call the reverse pets method in a minute. Okay, so what they want us to do is they want us to go to the other class called adoption, I believe. Yep. And then they want us to write this method called reverse pets. Now, first thing I'm going to notice, I'm going to go ahead and go to the top. We're in the adoption class. I see that we're going to go ahead and do something with the pets two-dimensional array, right? And that's kind of important because when I call the constructor, or when I use the constructor, it's going to require the two-dimensional array of pets. Okay. And as you may recall right here, do you see how we made pet adoptions and there's this new adoption constructor? That's going to take in the parameter called pets, which is what it's telling you right here. We need a two-dimensional array as my input, essentially, to run this thing. And it's going to localize that two-dimensional array to that object that I associated with. So again, just to recap, because that's kind of fast, and I make an object called pet adoptions. It's going to go ahead and point to the adoption class and use the constructor for adoption. And that constructor for adoption requires me to use some sort of two-dimensional array. Okay, so in order for me to use it, I have to create a two-dimensional array called pets, referring to the pet class, and then make them all right here. So all of this is going to be shoved in, attached to this object for pet adoptions. And then I want to print it. Okay, so getting back to what we're supposed to do here is we need to write a new method called reverse pets that's going to take in some sort of indexed value. So now what is the purpose of that, you might ask? Well, basically what we're trying to do is we want to reverse the row located at the parameter index by swapping the first and last element. So let me show you what that means. So in this case, you see how in the first row, which is row number 0, by the way, in Java, they want us to switch the order of the first element with the last element. So dog2 and dog8 should flip, is what they're looking for. So let's think about that. Now, I would highly recommend that you actually use your notepad and write these down, okay? It's not as easy for me to do, so I'll use my little annotator. And maybe I should use, yeah, blue seems to be working fine. Try to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so if I make my way over to the adoption.java, so here's what I'm thinking. Actually, I'm gonna go back here. If I could, I'll just draw here, okay? I'll make kind of this new matrix. I'm just going to focus on row 0, and this is kind of hard, so don't laugh. So we have this new first element, A, B, and C, right? Kind of in that order like they do. So I'm just using letters because it's a lot easier. Basically, I want to swap A and C. So in order to do that, I'm going to be thinking, well, remember the columns are 0, 1, and 2. So I'm thinking, okay, we want to do something with 0, 0. And essentially, I'll just use a double arrow, right? To be like, hey, we want to go ahead and swap these two. Okay, and C is in row 0, column 2. Right, so that's what I'm thinking in my head. Cool. So now how we're going to do that, it gets interesting. Now, remember, it's a computer program, right? So we have to be very explicit, like I'm talking to a 2-year-old, on what to do. In my mind, I'm like, okay, just take A and switch it with C. Duh, right? Take 0, 0 and switch it with 0, 2. Well, in the computer program, we can't do that as easily. So in general, with coding and everything, well, pretty much everything we do on the computer is storage based. So A is in a storage slot, C is in a storage slot. It's easy for you and me to reach out my hand and grab A and C and just flip them. We can't do that. But what we can do is we can actually take A, store it somewhere temporarily, go ahead and let C become A, and then the new position of C becomes the temporary. Now, that might seem kind of weird, so let me show you how it's done, and then hopefully that'll kind of make sense. So I'll keep this up here, the annotation, so we have that idea. Okay, again, I'm going to write all this down on my piece of paper, on my composition notebook, because, well, I'm not like you guys and young anymore, so it's kind of old. I'm kind of old, right? So I have to kind of keep track of what's what. So first thing I need to do is I need to do some way to essentially store the 0, 0. Otherwise, I'm going to just lose it. So I need to store 0, 0 or whatever, right, into some sort of temporary file. Storage location. I just say file, but it needs to be stored somewhere. So what does that mean? Well, since I am talking about pets, so each one of these elements is talking about a pet. It could be a dog or cat and their age, right? So I'm going to go ahead and bust out the pet class again, and we're going to, call it a temporary, right? So this is a temporary storage thing. I'll type out the whole word so it's really, clear. And I'm going to go ahead and take that array called pets, right? Because that's what we're going to take up here, right? We have pets that's going to be localized to my object. And I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to this 0, 0 just to get it going. Don't forget your semicolon. So this is going to make it so that we can store 0, 0 to a temporary file. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make 0, 0 become 0, 2. Sorry, I have a hard time with the brackets. So how are we going to do that? Well, now I can do pets 0, 0 instead of equal to pets 0, 2. So basically so basically 0, so I'm making pets 0, 0 become pets 0, 2. Okay. So again, I'm taking pets 0, 2 and I'm shoving, so let me try and write that. So 0, 0 becomes 0, 2. So in other words, I can say if I'm using my letters there, right, I would make that A become a C. So now that means in this example I'm just giving you with my annotation, 0, 0 is equal to a C. We've just done that with this code here. All right, and then finally what I'm going to do is what are we going to do about pets 0, 2, right? Whoops. Because pets 0, 2 is actually still C. I haven't done anything to it yet. So all I've done is taken C and I moved it over to 0, 0. Cool. Well, this is where the temporary storage comes into play because temporary storage is right A, right? So that's what I'm going to bring in back to pets 0, 2. And then this is a void, right? So all it's doing is performing an action. It's not returning anything. So that's that. Got my curly brace there. Okay, so now this is going to store. So we've done all our storage things. So keep that in mind because that's something new. Doesn't come up anywhere else. Doesn't even come up in the earlier code, right? It just pops up into these a couple of these harder ones. And then when I go back to adoption runner, I think I still need to declare, yeah, you need to use the method. So I'm going to call the reverse method and then I'm going to print this thing, right? So the first thing I need to do is call. So we're going to do call the reverse pets method, which is going to be pet adoptions, right? And we're going to do the reverse pets method. And so again, pet adoption is the object. I'm going to use that object to call the reverse pets method. Reverse pets method is not static, right? If you don't believe me, look here, right? There's no static here. It just says void, which means there's no return, right? So that's why I'm able to get away with no word return here. However, keep that in mind. It wants an int index as its input. So I need to pick a row that I'm going to flip the values on. So say 0. Okay. So now it's going to go ahead and swap A and C in that 0th row, which is the first row we see. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and print. And we're going to print that pet adoptions object once I've done the transformation. So let's see what it pops out to be. So it should print 2 of them, right? We got dog 2, dog 5, dog 8. And look what happens here. We have dog 8, dog 5, dog 2. So that's successfully done. Let's go ahead and test it. And then we are done. Perfect. So I hope that helps. Again, this idea was definitely not clear to me. I think I ended up trying to do some weird if statement or something to have it read. So you won't need to do anything fancy in this lesson. No for loops, no while loops, no if statements are necessary. So keep that in mind, but this is kind of new and something I didn't think of before. So there you go. Enjoy.